I would like to ask Peter Golob to come on stage. And Philipp Humm. And Stéphane is staying. It must be the French day today. So what I would like to do is ask you a question. Because we have heard in all variations how miserable the market is, but we also heard the commissioner taking the financial market as a witness on her side. So, what have you heard this afternoon, and what do you think that the commissioner was referring to?
Well, the commissioner referred to some very precise data that she had. She'd spoken to some of the investors who were large investors who seemed to see this as an opportunity to, or these proposals as signaling a huge change. I must say, from my own personal perspective, I don't see much of that, and my phone certainly hasn't been ringing off the hook since the proposals were published. But I'm sure she has spoken to some people. I think when I look at this, I find myself echoing some of the comments that Stéphane made, which there does seem to be a worrying disregard for the interests, for the legitimate interests of shareholders when it comes to shareholder returns, and a lot of criticisms about dividends, which don't necessarily stack up, as Tim pointed out. So, if we have an environment where there's, or if one of the underlying biases in directing these proposals is anti-shareholder remuneration or anti-shareholder returns, I don't think we're ever going to get to an environment of the sort envisaged by Philipp, where she talks about huge investment in innovation and why can't we have a Silicon Valley in Europe. So I think we have to treat shareholders fairly. So those were two things which I take away from the point of view of the investor or the big investors. From the point of view of a financial markets practitioner, and I realize the banker's perspective has not always been the most popular perspective over the last few years, it seems to me that this isn't so much of the mixture of the sweet and sour as it is a mixture of the opaque and the transparent. And when I look at these the proposals and go through them again and see what would I invest in tomorrow that I wouldn't have invested in yesterday as a result of this, I'm pretty much stymied. I might pick up on the one thing which I regard as a transparent, which is the impact on roaming, which seems to be pretty clear. And therefore, I might go seek an opportunity in roaming arbitrage if I can figure my way around multilateral arrangements among the other operators. But apart from that, there's nothing here which one could really sink one's teeth into as a visible return. So that's why I say it sits into the opaque and the transparent.
Well, I have to give a balance. What about the fact that we have been, as an industry, complaining for years that every country had their own rules around spectrum and we're going to harmonize it? We have seen just a study that says harmonization was great. I mean, is the financial world blind for that? Is the financial world not happy if people can go with a passport to other markets?
I think harmonization is great. My problem with, and the reason why I say it's opaque, is I ask myself how, by who, and at what cost in each one of those circumstances. So spectrum harmonization is fine, and it's a very laudable ideal. I just don't see how it's put into effect if the actual spectrum awards sit with the individual countries. If, as Randall pointed out, there's no effort to have standard license terms. And standard and longer license terms, at least, if not indefeasible rights of use. So I just don't see how it's put into effect. So if it happens, it's wonderful. Consolidation is another point that the Commissioner's report alludes to. And I think that again, that would probably be the most immediate impact on the market.
Love consolidation.
We love consolidation because it realizes immediate synergies and therefore to many operators in Europe.
So, Philipp, in a way that you could describe the business model of Vodafone, more or less the ideal to judge what this proposal means. So did you already have a view? Is this sweeter than for the other guys, for you guys?
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, overall, Commissioner Cruz does a great job in, let's say, painting very big words. But the devil is really here also in the details. And so if you look at the different proposals, there is very little in the proposals which concretely allow us really to drive further consolidation, which concretely allow us to stimulate growth, right? And many of the topics we are talking of are talked in a very superficial way. Take spectrum harmonization, great, but the key core issue underneath that is that we should have spectrum which is perpetual and tradable, right? The key issue is that we should make sure that not a forced player or fifth player is forced into markets where it is absolutely not necessary, driving prices down, or where you have MVNO regulation, which basically force companies to offer deals to people below cost, right? So I think these are the things which we think are really missing. Now the second point is overall the biggest benefit we have as industry players is normally in national consolidation and less in cross-border consolidation. So we need to have more impulses of a pro-business-oriented regulation to drive further national consolidation. And national consolidation can be wireless players amongst themselves or can be wireless players with fixed players. And that's, I think, where the bigger synergy and the bigger value is for our industry overall.
So that means that you have no problem with the fact that we have 28 regulators, because they protect the fact that you get 28 different markets. So funny enough, I thought that you would be the guy who said, no, we want a pan-European market. What you basically now say is, we're better off to take the synergies on a country-by-country level.
No, you're twisting what I'm saying.
Sure, of course, that's my role.
What I'm saying is there are certain elements which are good in the regulation, so it's obviously better if you have a pan-European regulation overall, but you need to define what you want to do with it. Right? If you have a pan-European regulation where European regulator then says, fine, we will have MVNO deals everywhere and we will have fourth player, fifth player in every market, then that does not help anybody. To the contrary, you destroy further value in the industry. If we have a regulator which does not evolve the spectrum model to a model where it is perpetual and tradable, it will not help the industry. Right? So, yeah, the titles are great, right? The package sounds great, but the package needs to be really more concrete to really drive a change and give impulses to the industry. Otherwise it won't.
So, Stéphane, I've been 38 years in this business. I have to admit it, 38 years. And we are the best complaining industry in the world. I mean, we are world champion in complaining. And the more we complain, the more everybody feels cozy. Then we go out of the room and we hit each other with all kinds of complaints about each other. So, do you think that complaining is going to help to bring the politicians to a higher level? Because one way or the other, we have to get out of this mode of this addiction to feel sorry for ourselves. What is it you think we should do?
Well, as you, Ben, even though I don't have 38 years behind me, but only 4, I hate what you describe, which is, this kind of big meeting where we spend 2, 3, 4 hours to complain. The problem is that if we want to avoid this, we should not start the meeting by a beautiful study comparing Europe with the rest of the world and aligning some figures on the state of the industry. So let's be clear, it's not, because we like that we complain. It is because we face, as CEOs, a lot of challenges that are partly due to a policy. And maybe we are in our role if we try to stimulate our politicians in order to lead them to ask why Europe is today the area in the world with the lowest growth, why Europe is today the area with the lowest investment, why Europe has lost nearly all its champions in technology, why Europe has missed the internet evolution, etc. So if we don't do that ourselves, who is going to do? Of course, we can spend hours celebrating things that we have done because fortunately we are successful from time to time. But I am not sure that regarding our decision makers, and to be honest, I think they are very easily in a satisfactory mode regarding the real state of economy of the continent. I don't think that we would be very helpful. So you're right, it's hateful to some extent to be like that. But unfortunately, I think we cannot totally avoid this. Now, clearly, we have to be realistic. We have to be also to recognize that maybe from time to time we have missed things, that we have not been totally relevant in the battles or in the fights that we have tried to pursue in the past. But today, once again, our key role, to me, is to awake our decision makers, especially in Europe, in order for them to try to move, to change the look to the industry, and to move. During the lunch, I was explaining what I do think is that, in fact, the way Europe is looking to our industry, the telco industry, has not really changed for 20 years. 20 years ago, we had big monopolies in every countries that were considered as unproductive and capturing value from the customers and the economy. And 20 years later, more or less, it is the same. And this is a big failure for us, probably. I think it's also a problem for decision makers and for politicians, because I do think that they do not draw all the consequences from the analysis that they make from the situation. You know, there is a considerable gap between the way they describe the current situation and what they propose. So that's it. Now, clearly, we have to talk about the future in more optimistic terms, yes. But it is true that we expect some help, we expect some change, just some change. What we ask is not, is not terrific. For instance, if Europe could stop to increase constantly the number of operators, that would be great. That would be great. If Europe decided, for instance, to really go into a spectrum harmonization process, this has been said. I like the prospect. The problem is that I am afraid that it's going to take a little bit of time, because you have 28 countries, 28 parliaments, 28 governments, 28 regulators today. So it's going to take a little bit of time, and I'm afraid that we will have this much later, 2016, where there is no more roaming cost and international calls pricing in Europe, for instance. So you have things that are relatively easy to do. You take a decision in Brussels, you cut prices, very easy to do. And you have things that are much more long, complicated, and risky at the end of the day. And that's it. So let's be optimistic, yes. Let's talk about innovation. We have talked about innovation, about venture capital, about the way we can work maybe more closely with OTT. OTT are not only competitors with the level playing field that we need with them. They can also be partners for us. And let's really enter into consolidation. We will not, in my view, be able to fix the situation of the industry in Europe if we don't really enter into a consolidation phases. We will see in a few key countries, Germany, maybe Italy, maybe Spain, Poland, maybe one day France, I don't know. We will see how policy makers, authorities, are doing in front of a consolidation coming from the industry. Because maybe a last word on that. If we want to stop complaining, there is something that we can do. It's to take the initiative ourselves, the industry, and then to go to the politicians, to Europe and to national authorities and say, look, this is what we have done. This is our project. It's somewhat, it could hurt a little bit of your regulation framework or approaches. But that is the answer that we think is necessary for the industry today. For instance, a big consolidation project. And we will see. Everyone will have to take his own responsibility in such a situation.
Because it's interesting to note that the consolidation by industry itself, as you are saying, which I think personally is a very positive move, is now coming from the outside from Europe. I mean, America Mobiles going into KPN, some of your colleagues said, well, it's a small country. Maybe, but it's a fundamental step. And, and if that's going to happen, it remains very, let's say, puzzling why it has to come from outside Europe to make consolidation inside Europe, and why Europe is not doing it. Would you agree with that analysis, Philipp?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, from a US perspective, and as you know, was in the US for quite some time, looking at Europe, Europe seems to be cheap because you simply have a lower multiple, right? So, and from an American perspective, you can be very quickly then positive, saying, look, it's pretty cheap, right? It's multiple of whatever, 5.2. In the US, we do more than 6. So if we enter that, add a little bit capex to it, we will basically see the market growing very rapidly. And now in the US market, because you have a scale market, you generate much more cash. Now, if you look at most of the European players, and we are a little bit an exception in that sense, most of the European players are quite cash constrained, which limits also then from another angle a little bit the consolidation, right? Which is not the case for the American players in general, right? So I mean, cash at the end of the day rules. If you have lots of cash, you can buy. If you have little cash, you can complain, but you can't buy. And so from that point of view, you have more American players coming in.
But our banker friend just said, guys, if you're going to consolidate, we are delighted. We're coming. You're bringing the money with you?
I'm sure. No, I think I can. Okay. Consolidation would be is in-market consolidation is easily financeable, and there's a ready audience for it. I mean, I think, and perhaps Stéphane's right that the only way to do it is to force the agenda, which to some extent has happened in Germany, to force the agenda or the operators force the agenda and take the gamble that it's actually going to be allowed to take place with remedies which are not so prohibitive as to destroy the costs, the benefits from synergies.
So one of the things that Randall was talking about very clearly was that a force in the market was the ability to trade in spectrum, to make it in the spectrum a kind of commodity that you can monetize by trading it amongst yourself and building a footprint. And he was basically saying, you must be a crazy person to buy roaming in the US, because the footprint that we have created by the trading of spectrum, is that something that the financial world has let's say, a vision about?
I don't think, well, it's not something the financial world has had to have too much of a vision about, because, I mean, it's taken place mostly between the operators. I think if it did take place, if it was allowed in Europe, then I think it would go very much as Randall indicated, that operators would build the blocks of spectrum as they wanted to.
Okay.
But it's not something that we've seen too much of here. If at all.
No, because it's very difficult to do, given the boundaries, 28 boundaries.
There's a bit where there's an overlap in something like the UK.
So doing the things ourselves, I like very much, Stéphane, what you just said. Instead of being passive, we're going active. Instead of waiting and always feel hard done by what other people decide about you, you're going to decide yourself. You think that the industry have enough leadership capability to go and do it? Or is it by the structure of 120 operators, as you were saying, the slowest one wins?
Well, I think that we must stop being self-censored to some extent, and probably be more bold in the way we are looking to those consolidation projects. Because today, in fact, we don't even think about consolidation, because we are sure that one step will be blocked either at the national level or, if not, in Brussels. And as you know, I like the Vice President Almunia in charge of competition policy in Europe. And especially, I like when he says, but, you know, I say nearly never no. Yes, because in fact, we do not submit anything to him. So he is never in a position to say no, because in fact, we have given up any project before, because we are so sure that the answer will be no. So this is something that we have to change, definitely. And I clearly hope that in some markets that we see today, like Germany, which is the largest market in Europe, it's going to be very important to see how the project in Germany is going on. I hope that this will really create now. Do we have a power of initiative? Yes, why not? Yes, definitely yes. I think that once again we must change our mind regarding this and probably listen a little less to our own legal experts and lawyers that, generally speaking, advise just not to even think about something because too risky, too etc. And be probably a little bit more in an entrepreneur mode regarding this consolidation issue.
Right, we have 5 minutes left. One chair has been missing here today, and that's the customer. We should have the voice of the customer. So let me have the voice of the customer and ask you all three 1 minute to tell me why this debate that we're having here today is relevant for me.
Well, to kick off with, I think I think why it's relevant is because you're facing a choice of whether you get the highest quality telecommunication services in the future or not. If the regulatory framework, if the position of the Commission isn't conducive to the necessary degree of investment, it's just not going to happen. And we'll always have cheap service, we'll have open internet, but we won't have high quality broadband, we won't have high quality mobile broadband, and we'll always be criticizing ourselves for being 5 or 6 years behind the United States or Asia. So I think now's the moment to decide that we've had cheap service for a long time. Let's have good service.
Okay.
I would tell him that if we want in 10 years' time that the European customer has all the benefits from the digital era, like e-health, e-education, connected things, mobile broadband everywhere, a big coverage for broadband fixed services, we need investment. We desperately need investment, and an investment is a mix of policy and also of an industry with people that are able to invest for the future. That is the first thing that I would tell him. The second thing that I would tell him is that certainly he's a customer, but he's also an employee, he's a taxpayer, he's a citizen, and that maybe it is a little bit difficult to see a service like so vital service as communication only with the customer eyes, and that I would probably propose him to be a little more a citizen than uniquely a customer, and to see what is the long-term interest of our continent.
You mean
right?
Simplifying, as a customer, you have the choice. Either you can say, I want to have cheap, right? Or I want to have choice. I want to have growth, and I want to have prosperity, because our industry drives a lot of prosperity in the country, and I want to have jobs, right? And so I think we need to be much more proactive with customers, telling them that they also have to help us influence a regulator to not only be pro-price, but also pro-business, as the US has done for a long time.
Right. Okay. It's now time to reflect amongst yourself, to give you a voice, and the voice is outside. That means that we have a break, and we need to be back here in 25 minutes. Yeah, 25 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.